besides the fact that you didn't have to get consensus on musical decisions, what was different with this solo release and how you approached it versus how you've made albums with the various bands you've worked with?
Oh, well, I mean, this record was recorded directly in response to how I had recorded my prior solo record called Game Day, which came out in 2018. And that was a self-performed, self-recorded, self-mixed type of deal. And that was great because that's what I'd always wanted to do. I'd always wanted to make something because I can play a lot of different instruments to a competent degree, I suppose. Nothing particularly sterling, but so I did that, and it sounded weird, and it was all right. The songs I still stand by, but their performances were, he should have gotten a band. So this time around, the idea was let's make something quick and dirty with a producer and a rhythm section in a real studio, and spend a little bit of money and make it happen. So that's what I did, and it was very exciting to get to do that.
Although that previous one, as we had talked about years ago, it had this great edginess that you don't always find in music nowadays, and so that, to me, that's what made it stand out, was like, in a world where everything is polished beyond recognition, it was great to find something kind of gritty as far as that goes.
Absolutely. But I do think people that are looking for the grit in me will find it in this album, because you can't make a record in 3.5 days without it being kind of um, almost extemporaneous. I mean, the rhythm section, Rob Ladd on drums and Robert Sledge on bass, had been sent demos that I had done. So they had charts and they knew how the songs went, but we didn't really actually ever get together until we got in the studio and started recording. And so it was totally what they'd come up with from my initial directives. And I thought they did a splendid job. And we had Don Dixon in the studio, in the control room, with Jason Richmond engineering. And those guys both are really acute listeners. They know, Dixon can listen to a million factors at once. And he did. And I'm sure that what he didn't catch, Jason did. So we got most of the songs done in just a couple of takes, and that was exciting. And then I got the vocals and the overdubs, all the lead guitars and stuff like that done in about a day, all the lead vocals and background vocals. So I didn't have time to really double cross myself or overthink or second guess. Double crossing, second guessing, almost.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I guess that is kind of a recurring issue, to the point where I keep talking to musicians that talk about trying to do everything they can to remove over-analysis out of the process. Recently, last year, did interviews with Billy Sheehan and talking about his different projects, and he tries to approach it with this motto of, if you think, you stink, and just try and get out of your head. And so it sounds like you've found a way to do that by just crunching the time, and okay, we don't have time to think, let's just go with it.
I think it's partially that, and I think also the idea of putting trust in other musicians, that they will do a good job by your songs. They work to the benefit of the song, and I think that that's a great thing for me to learn, even in my dotage, that you really can trust people. I mean, it wasn't that Game Day was a matter of dis or mistrust. It was just, I felt like I knew what the songs wanted, and maybe I did, and maybe they did, and maybe they didn't need those parts. But the producer, who's going to tell the artist if you're the producer, right?
Right.
So the feeling is really just to kind of, it made it an easier record for me to make, because I could take some of the hats off. I didn't have to be all things to all songs. I could just be the singer and guitar player when we recorded, and that was great.
and yet the title track is all you
Oh
on
yeah. Yeah,
everyone.
well. So I fudged it a little bit, but
Right.
that one, it's funny. We did cut it, but it just didn't have the same vibe as the demo or whatever, the home recording of it. We'll call it, now that it's on a record, we can actually call it a recording of it rather
You're
than
right.
a home demo. You say demo and people think Fostex X15 cassettes,
R-
4-track
right.
cassettes going at 1 7/8 inch per second.
Right.
No, not anymore. We have the digital virtual media, which was great.
Right.
But it turned out, I'm a better recorder now than I was 7 years ago. I'm a better drummer now than I was 7 years ago. Um, I'm certainly better looking. So why not put that song on there as the title cut, right?
You're right. Right. Yeah. It's like I recorded with all these musicians, but the one I did, no, that's going to be the title one because I want everyone to focus on that one. Yeah.
I don't care what you think about me. What do you think about me?
Right. Yeah. Right. Um, but I am always, curious when those things happen. 'Cause it goes back to kind of Adrian Belew solo albums where he did, played all the different instruments and everything, and it you know, besides the ability to easily coordinate all the performers' calendars, I'm wondering if, sometimes there's an advantage to, okay, let's have the least experienced guy on this instrument add to it, if you know what I mean.
I do. I do. You want to kind of go for feral performances if you can.
Yeah.
I mean, you want it to jump out of the grooves of the record. And if you've rehearsed the song to death, or if you've recorded it to death, or if you've produced it to death or arranged it to death, it's dead. You know,
Mhm.
it's and no amount of reanimation will get it back happening again. You can work to the disadvantage of a song. That's why I firmly believe after this record that doing stuff with other people is really the way to do it. It saves you time. It saves your brain issues,
Mhm.
and you get people who are thinking with you, and they're thinking ensemble, and they're thinking what's going to work with what Mr. Holsapple is playing over there on the loud guitar. Well, I can add this, or I can't add this. But it's great, people, and these guys, Robert and Rob and Dixon and Jason, they're all just like, they really have a lot of experience under each of their collective belts. And, we're all kind of contemporaries to a degree. Jason's a lot younger than us, but he's worked on so many records that I love, but we all have mutual respect. And when somebody says, I don't think that's going to work, then we understand that they're not just saying it to stick a stick a stick in the spokes of the bike tire.
Right, right.
So, we listen to each other play, we listen to each other speak. We try to be respectful that way. I think that's a good way to make a record. It is for me, certainly.
Yeah, yeah, and, I mean, and then as you said, I mean, impressive backgrounds, your drummer's from the Connells and your bassist, works with Ben Folds 5 and, so they've recorded some impressive stuff on their own. And, kind of the theme of, the face of 68, I would also say it's a very mature way to look at things to say, you're not fragile about your own ideas. It's like, okay, these people they want to genuinely make this better. And,
Yeah.
it's, sometimes you get, the piss and vinegar of young musicians that no, this is how I envisioned it. And so to have someone that says, no, I'm really open to what you think and to tell me what doesn't work
Yeah.
is quite impressive, I would say.
It's really helpful for a guy like me who has a lot of ideas, but I also need someone to tell me that they're not all great ideas. I didn't invent the wheel on any of these songs. It's a guitar based, drums based record. right? It's
Hmm.
kind of noisy. I like all that stuff. It's not the songs are not the songs I would have written in 1981. Thank goodness. I mean, why would anybody expect them to be? They're not even the songs that I wrote in 1997. I mean, my
Hmm.
life has changed so dramatically over the years. I mean, I'm a happily married father and grandfather. I never thought I'd hear myself say any of that stuff. If you'd asked 22-year-old me, what would 69-year-old be like? 69-year-old me be like, I think 22-year-old would have said, oh, dead. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, at that pace I was going, very likely. But
Mm.
I had experiences that made me really appreciate um, getting older. I'm fine with it. I don't have a problem with it. I can still make rock and roll records, and the lyrics are going to be about different things. There's a lot of loss on this record, but there's a lot of humor on the record as well. I think that I like the idea that the record, to me, is a kind of a distillation of what goes on in my mind all the time.
Mm.
We're thinking about a lot of stuff. There's the human jukebox that's just running from the second I get up to the instant I fall asleep. I can't turn off. So there's a soundtrack going all the time. But I'm thinking about all this other stuff, like losing friends, relationships over the years with lovers and friends, and how that all changes. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going through my head, and I still need to get it out, but it's not all going to be like, hey, you broke my heart, so you know you don't like it at all. It's not
Right,
all
right.
not black and white anymore. That it's gotten so gray. I mean, don't you?
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah, I have more than you do, I think, at this point. Uh,
You
um,
have more hair than I have. I
you're
don't.
right.
I have plenty of gray hair. So.
Right. Um, but but that's the thing is, it's, to jump on the one example, the song "Larger Than Life," which is a very, it's Carlo from the Continental Drifters, and yet it's not this song of sorrow. It's this song of defiance. There's this gritty, in your face guitar to it, and because normally when you hear anyone write a song about the passing of a dear friend, it's always this very melancholy kind of thing. But this one has this kind of attitude where it's like, you're processing grief, but you're also flipping the bird at the universe at the same time. And is that just an example of, all right, this is the complicated human that I am and that other people are?
I guess so. I mean, I see that as a kind of a representation of Carlo's energy in the energy of that song. I mean, I think if if he was alive and was playing drums on it, he would kick it like Rob did. It's got the power of my my deceased friend. It's got conversation that I'm having with him beyond the pale. I need that. I need to grieve somehow, and I can't sit and cry because that doesn't do any good. So I might as well make a rock song that just says your power is in me still. You visit me still. You communicate with me still, just from the music you've left behind, just from the conversations we had when you were alive, just from the joy of having gotten to be in a band with you, and several bands for that matter.
Hmm.
So it's a memorial piece without a doubt, but much the same way as the second line in New Orleans is the brass band coming back from the funeral, and everybody's shaking their booty and celebrating the dead and waving handkerchiefs, and lots of love in the air. That's kind of what this is in a way. It isn't a second line strictly, but it has got the same
Right.
sort of vibe.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm also wondering, did it take time for you to evolve as a musician before you became comfortable doing things like that? You know, where it's like, all right, well, this is a song about someone's passing, but it's not going to be, melancholy.
Maybe, I don't know. The first bunch of songs that I wrote, like around the time of the DBs, were all kind of influenced by a relationship that I had in college that was overwhelmingly bad for me, and you know, provided lots and lots of lyrics. So I had that as that was the foundation of all that stuff. So I would say definitely with life experiences, with people passing away, with divorces, with people having kids, bands breaking up, new bands forming, you know, presidential terms, you name it, the changes have been dramatic. And so I hope that the breadth of what I can write about has also kept up with that. Because I don't want to be, I wanted this record to not be maybe what people might expect from me. I think I succeeded in
Hmm.
that. I think it's heavier. I think it's dirtier. I think it's more the guitar is more animalistic. I appreciate that. There isn't really any power pop except for She and Me at the very end. And, but there are some searing lead guitar parts on there. And that's why, it's sort of as a celebration of the pre Big Star me, I realized. Big Star came along and changed the game. But before that, we were listening to The Move, and we were listening to the Flamin' Groovies, and we were listening to Mott the Hoople, and Deep Purple, and Yes, and all of that sort of stuff. So there was, I was just looking at the set list for this band that I had in high school in 1972 with Mitch Easter and Chris Stamey, called Rittenhouse Square, and our set lists, we had 3 sets, of which, like, I would say there were 5 or 6 Humble Pie songs, 3 or 4 Bloodwind Pig songs, more blood rock songs than I remember us even thinking about doing. But there was a lot of Wishbone. I mean, 3 of the first 4 songs we worked up were Wishbone Ash songs from the first 2 records.
Hmm.
So guitar has always been in there for me. I've never been a great lead guitar player, but now, after playing with Paranoid Style for a few years, I've kind of got that down to where I can make a solo. So I wanted to display that on this record, and I think I did. And I hope that the people that love the power pop and the Americana guy will appreciate this ever so slightly heavier rendering of myself.
Yeah, and I think it also draws attention to the fact that, the industry tries to put artists into boxes, and you are this person, and you are this band, and all that kind of stuff. But really, they're much more complex. And you talk to any musician, and their interests and their influences are all across the board.
Mm,
Um,
it's true.
One musician I work with, who I think is a mutual friend, John Papagro out of New Orleans, and
Yeah.
he's very much known for his New Orleans stuff. And he talks about, yes, very much, influenced by Fats Domino and all the great music that came out of New Orleans. But he said, I also listened to Yes records and Peter Gabriel and all this other stuff, and
Mhm.
I'm not just one dimensional. And I think it's an important thing to keep bringing up is the average musician has much broader interests than I think they get painted for having in the press in particular. And it also brings me around to the song That Kind of Guy, which
I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming.
which as a music geek I honed in on. And first of all, I love the line that it says, I got all that boxed up reminders of what was once to be. Which, first of all, I have to want, I never want anyone to explain their lyrics, but I'm curious how that one came about. And was it like, how much is it like it just pops into your head from the muse, and how much of it is I'm really trying to find word combinations that really express all I'm trying to say here?
Well, okay, so that line in particular, I guess, came from looking at online ads. There was a company that used to sell like vinyl overstock, I guess you would have to call it. I bought this great 2 record set called Songs the Bonzos Taught Us. And it's all the original versions of things like Alibaba's Camel and
Hmm.
stuff that the Bonzo Dog Band had covered over the years. And it's really sensational. So I was like looking at the catalog and I was seeing all of this stuff. And it was like, you know, box sets of Otis Redding singles, on CD, and box sets of I don't know what all the, Ken Burns jazz, DVDs, all at cut
Mm,
rate and stuff like that. And I was thinking, I mean, I've been on both sides of that kind of guy music counter. I've been the guy selling the records. I've been the
mm,
guy buying the records. So I know what it takes to be that kind of guy because I am that kind of guy. I try not to be so much anymore. I have a few ground rules. I really don't want to pay more than $40 for a vinyl record,
mm,
especially because I could probably go someplace and get $22 records for that price, and they'd be a little scratchy, but I'd have more records to listen to.
mhm,
I also don't like to buy something and keep it sealed because I think that the music doesn't get a chance to escape a sealed record cover. And isn't it basically that you want to listen to the record?
mhm,
So there, I have a few tenets like that. And I don't go buying as much, but I did actually recently finally get another copy of Split Ends by The Move, one of my very favorite collections of Move music. And
mm.
unfortunately, it does not have the liner notes from the inside with it. It's got the liner notes on the outside, but not the ones on the inside. So
Right.
woe is me. That kind of guy, first world problem.
Right, right, yeah. Um, yeah, that's like, yeah, because I live in just down the road in Cary, North Carolina, and the downtown there now has a used record shop. Uh,
Nice.
I can't think of its name, but I pop in there every so often, and yeah, I've found that my own like I now have my own direction, my own guide for flipping through stuff is will I actually listen to this? Because it's like I don't want to buy it just to have it. I want to buy it because I want to play it. And there's
I
times
hear you.
where, my wife will say, "Oh, how about this?" And I'm like, "Fabulous album. I'm probably not going to listen to it though." Just because like maybe I got burned out on it way back when it came out or something to that effect. And if anyone wants to discuss it, I will say this is fantastic, but I'm not going to play it, and I don't want to buy it just to have it sit on the shelf, which
Yeah.
I think kind of coincides with your I don't want to just have it, sealed in a
Yeah.
way.
Well, I got the edict from my incredibly wonderful wife that I needed to figure out what I was going to do with my vinyl collection of records and my burgeoning CD shelves, which I am looking at right now. They're just closing in on me like a dumpster with Harrison Ford. But um, I think my kids are going to take them. I think
Oh.
my younger children are 17 and 21 uh, and or 17 and 21, and they are really, really great record collectors now themselves and listeners. I think if there's anything that I've given them in this life, hopefully the ability to listen critically and enjoy all kinds of music is the best I could possibly give them, other than just being kind, which we
Mhm.
all hope for. But the fact that my son just sent me a New York Dolls T-shirt for my birthday,
Oh.
what's not to love?
Yeah.
I mean, my daughter is going. I sent my daughter off to school today with my CD of Days of Wine and Roses by the Dream Syndicate. I said, "This is a really good way to go to school today. I think you'll find if you listen to this, you'll be most pleased." And she appeared to be. So hopefully
Yeah.
they'll find a home with the kids.
Right. No, that's very cool. That's great. And a great way to I don't know, communicate, learn to speak each other's language, so to speak, using that as a means of communication.
Well, yeah,
Um
and they tell me about stuff too. Believe me, I would not know about Beach Bunny. I would not know about um, Nia Almanac. I wouldn't know about what half of the stuff that they listen to. I think they've gotten really sort of selective, and they try to find me stuff that they think I'll actually like, rather than just throwing all of the weird stuff that they like at me. But every so often, I will hear music emanating from somewhere in the house, and I'll walk closer to it with my Shazam app just to
you're right.
what's playing. So yeah, I mean Peach Pit, for example. What great music, you know?
Hmm.
I love
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. You know, it's very exciting to find stuff via your kids. That makes me feel kind of relevant. I like that.
Yeah. And I'm wondering also how, regarding this song, how do you look at your record collection? How does that, I don't know, what what is it, it's obviously not a trophy case as far as that goes, but because so often it like defines who the person is as how they see their collection and what it should involve and what it shouldn't involve. And
Yeah.
so I'm wondering in what ways, now that you've changed and evolved over years, are you that kind of guy, and are you not that kind of guy?
I will always be that kind of guy. I can't help that, I spend inordinate amount of time thinking about things like, was Elvin Bishop happy when Mike Bloomfield left the Butterfield Blues Band and he could take the solos? Why am I thinking about stuff like that? Don't I have banking to do, or shouldn't I be sweeping the bathrooms? I don't know.
Right.
But at the same time, yeah, I look at this record collection and I think, I've gone through a few record collections. I lost most of my main record collection during Katrina in New Orleans, because it was like
Mhm.
my albums were in the house, but I had a case of like thousands of 45s that was in a storage unit that just got bulldozed before anybody could get to it.
Mhm.
So I've spent the years since trying to be a little more zen about it, and trying to be a little bit more um, particular about what I get. So when I look over at the record collection now, I see stuff that is really important to me. I've got nice, pristine vinyl copies of Number One record and Radio City by Big Star. I've got the two Asylum Judy Sill records. Stuff that is absolutely meaningful to me. I have the reissue of On the Loose by High Rhythm that was on Fat Possum. Stuff like
Mhm.
that. I got a nice clean copy of Bell, the Bell album by Al Green. Important stuff. Those are things that I will listen to, and yet I have things in the collection. I can see right here that I've got records that I would never listen to. There's a copy of Red Octopus by Jefferson Starship, I think, that
Huh.
was bestowed upon me with a bunch of records that somebody was getting rid of because they were moving. And I picked a few things out of there that were kind of okay. And a lot of it was just like, why do I have three Mason Prophet records now? Ah, you know, but and the other thing is I try to go looking when I go to a record store. I'm like you, will I listen to it? But I'm still such a perfect shopper, because I'll be flicking through there and there's a copy of Raw Sienna by Savoy Brown. Oh, it's $4. Let's see what it looks like. And of course, I buy it because I love Raw Sienna. I have a
Hmm.
copy of the Grease Band Grease Band's eponymous record on Shelter. I buy. That's the group that backed up Joe Cocker for years. It's a great
Okay.
record, not well known, but it's one of my very favorites. So
Yeah.
I'm looking. Let's put it this way: I'm looking, but I'm not looking carefully. I'm just kind of seeing what I see, and if something strikes my fancy, boom, it's mine.
And then switching gears, and one thing we haven't really talked about is how have you evolved, in your opinion, as a singer over the years? And, how have maybe your goals for your vocals changed over the years?
Wow, nobody's ever asked me that question.
Hmm.
I think I am a better, stronger singer now than I was. I think when the DBs went out last year on tour, I think that Chris and I were both singing as well as we ever have, especially with those songs back in the days that the band was together in the early 80s. I can absolutely say that we were uh, haphazard at best, awful
Mhm.
at worst, um, which gives you a kind of an idea of the range of how confident we were as singers. And I mean, I've always liked singing. I've sung since I was a kid. I was in choir. I sang in school choruses. I'm not a trained singer, but I
Mhm.
like to sing. I've gotten better, I think, as the years have gone by. I try to write in a range that isn't a stretch for me now. So that's huge. I try to give myself lyrics I can remember. That's huge. Um, yeah, those are the main things I think that have changed, that have given me more breadth as a singer. I'm still no Caruso. And I listen to people singing and I think, my gosh, why, how can I sing when there's somebody out there singing like this? I listen
Mhm.
to somebody like Caleb Cottle, great North Carolina singer songwriter, just wonderful singer, great stuff. I mean, Joe Henry, another North Carolinian, great singer.
Mhm.
I mean, unique, different, fantastic, unlike anybody. I mean, I don't know what I sound like. Some people say, "Oh, you sing like fill in the blank.
Yeah.
You sound like Warren Zevon. You sound like Lowell George." I'm like, really? Okay, I don't get it, but I mean, I never saw myself as a particularly good singer, but now I've gotten to the point where I realize that people like the sound of my voice. So instead of saying, "Oh, I'm not a very good singer," I just say thanks and keep going, because it does nobody any good to just beat yourself up for not being the greatest singer that ever came down the pike. Otis Redding, that's already happened. What are we going to do?
Right, right. Well, I mean, it's also kind of like there are a lot of guitarists I admire, and I would never put them in the role of, in the ranking of greatest guitarist ever, in that running. But it's like, you know what? They were perfect for this band, and the
Oh yeah.
sound they got fit the song. Um,
Yeah,
what I'm,
nobody ever says, "Hey, Wilco Johnson and Dr. Feelgood," because it wasn't like he was Guitar Hero, noodle factory of notes. It was just this abrasive machine gun of powerful rhythm that had lead notes in it he was able to pull out. But
mhm.
that kind of thing. Yes, I
Yeah.
agree.
And, but it also makes me wonder, and again, because it takes an appreciation for, okay, my voice is very different from these people's voices, and so it's learning to work with what you have and your range and that kind of thing.
Exactly.
But I'm wondering, because you've done so much work with Darius Rucker, who has one of those voices, as you've said. It could sing selections of the U.S. tax code and it would sound good. And I realize your voices are very different, but I'm wondering if you took anything away from your work with him that you have applied to your own singing.
Well, the main thing I would say is that when I got to play with Darius in Hootie and the Blowfish for 26 years on and off, I saw my role as being part of the frame for the beautiful picture that Darius was painting. And it occurred to me that a great band, and I consider Hootie a great band plays to the singer. And I think other people have said this as well. And I'm sure you could go back, to like big bands and early jazz, to where it's like you got to listen to what the singer is doing, and that's going to tell you what you should play and what you should not play. You know, that whole genius of the is not the notes you play, but the notes that you leave out. And
Right.
I think that though I am no kind of singer compared to Darius, I do know that if I'm singing these songs, I need to make the singing the focus of how people perceive what they're hearing. If
Mm-hmm.
it if I'm playing with a bassist and drummer and guitar player, if I'm sitting there in somebody's living room with my acoustic guitar, pounding the living daylights out of it, I still need to pound the living daylights out of it, but not so my voice is not the focus, if that makes sense. You know,
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
you can't compensate with guitar volume for anything. You just need to make sure that the singer, in this case me, is sticking out, you know, and make sure that, because that's where the personality of the song is, right? The lyrics, the melody, hopefully, if I'm singing it right, you know. But that it totally makes sense to me that that's what it is, and it took me so long to figure that out. You know, I
Mm.
think of the late days of the DBs when Gene was on lead guitar and we had Jeff Beninado on bass and Will, and you know, it was like I'm out there and I'm trying to play these guitar lines like Love is for Lovers that I've written, and I'm trying to sing to that, and I'm trying to get ready to hit, you know, somewhere there's something that I can do to make my guitar louder for the solo, because it needs to be louder. But what do I do? You know, it's like this constant like barrage. You talk about the human jukebox going on stage. It's really messy because there's other songs playing while you're trying to think about the one you're playing. And so
Mhm. Right.
give man a break. Um, so yeah, you know, I mean, it's like the like I say, the 2025 model Holsapple that will be test driving this summer at a venue or a home near you is a lot more confident in his vocal. Feels like he knows how to make it sound correctly phrased and in tune. He knows how to reduce a song from the guitar, bass, drums, vocal overdubs version to guitar and vocal, and not
Mhm.
lose, and try not to lose any essence of the song. And I think I've been able to somehow or other corral the song around that that uh, that structure of just acoustic and vocals. So, and I'm very glad about that because I get a little worried about that sometimes.
Mm. Yeah, and I would say that's again a common theme among musicians I talk to is those who've been around for more than a day or two. They all say is like I'm a smarter singer than I used to be, um, and like they know how to use their voice better. They know how to
Yeah.
pace things better. Um, they know how to get what they want out of their voice better instead of just going from 0 to 60 with every single line
Oh
kind of
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
and I mean,
Um,
absolutely the case. I mean, for me, I learned a few years ago that you can concentrate on your vocal or you can concentrate on the guitar. You can't do both really accurately. So,
mm,
so what I would do would be I would go for a while and I would make sure that the guitar was okay and I wasn't really paying attention to the vocal. So once I got that in place, then I was able to shift back and kind of be the singer with the guitar rather than the guitarist with the singing. You know,
yeah.
so that was really handy to be able to do that. So when things get a little hairy in the vocal world, I just sort of like trust your hands. It's going to be fine. You'll be all right, and just focus on that and just get yourself through the song that way, and it'll all be dandy.
Yeah. Okay. And kind of coming back to the overall theme, of what, or at least what seems the theme to me to be the album. Um, there's the saying that, any advice you give is usually advice you're giving to your younger self. Um, and both, Face of 68 but also the song High High Horse, it's got this great dose of perspective that, I wonder you know, if it's like these are songs that couldn't be written by a 20-year-old, as you
Yeah.
say. It's like you almost have to go through all of that to have that viewpoint. And you know, I'm wondering, is it because the songs themselves are like these mixes of humor and it's pathos, it's humor and sadness at the same time, and you know, and is that what you're feeling as you look at this big jumble, you know, that we all go through?
I think so. You know, I would also add "Anytime Soon," the first song on the record, to that list of kind of looking back in not exactly horror, but you
Yeah.
know, I mean, in some cases horror, some of the stuff, but a lot of it is looking back tenderly and wishing for, and a lot of it is looking back and being grateful for having moved on. But yeah, I mean, I think I've been making records since 1972, and I think that my feeling is that I can still do it and I can remain relevant doing it. The goals have changed, as in the face of 68. If it was going to happen, it would have happened by now. You know, I mean, I never give up hope, but I also am pragmatic enough to realize that my the younger people out there are maybe not going to hear this the same way. But hopefully, enough people that are fans of the DBs and the Continental Drifters and the stuff I've done with Chris and the Paranoid Style and all the people that I've gotten to work with will hear this as a natural development, and not a second childhood. I mean, you know, yeah, it's closer to Blodwin Pig than it is to Big Star, but it's okay. You know, I I want to be able to make records for the rest of my life. I want to be able to make records that are enjoyable to me without having to worry about the demographics of my audience. You know, apart from, are they alive? Are they dead?
Right.
No, mostly I just want word of mouth. I think word of mouth has been what has gotten me the the history I have now. You know, I'm very proud of all the stuff that I've been able to achieve in 52 years of recording, and I'm still, you know, I'm still doing it. And I'm still not finished, and I'm not actively reaching for the brass ring, and not doing that has taken a lot. You know, it's like getting a producer and getting a rhythm section. Don't worry if it isn't going to sell a million copies. It doesn't really, you know, not to be Bill Murray, it just doesn't matter.
Right.
You're making this record and you're liking the songs and you feel strongly enough about them that you think other people will like them, especially people who have liked your stuff in the past, then score. You are doing the right thing, and popularity be damned, it doesn't matter. It's really about trying to satisfy your soul, trying to empty it out, empty the bin out. You know, that's what I did. Once I finished Larger Than Life, I was like, you know, oh, it's been 6 years, 7 years since I finished the last solo record. Maybe I've got some songs for a new record. So I sat back and listened to them, and there they were. So,
Hmm.
you know, basically, this is like cleaning out the lint trap. And so we'll see what happens after a few dozen more loads in the next couple of years, and see if I come up with something equally interesting. I am thinking seriously of recutting Game Day with a live band, which I think would be
Oh,
fun. You know, see what it
okay.
sounds like that. I don't know whether that's going to happen, but you know, that's right up there with my covers album.
Okay. um, yeah, and but I guess that you kind of hit upon a point, you know, another advantage I would say to if you listen to Face of 68 or Game Day, it's, you know, I believe this guy believes what he's singing and experienced what he's singing and feels what he's singing. Whereas there's this emphasis on perfection in the bigger industry where it's like, okay, perfect, but I don't buy it.
Mm.
Um, or, you know, to put another way, I've had some conversations with this drummer, Michael McDermott, who he was in this punk band called Bouncing Souls, and now he's backing up Joan Jett. And he talks about, he's like, there's all these other drummers that are online that are in such a hurry to just learn a cover and then put it up there as fast as possible. And he's like, I don't want that. I want to believe that you've, sit with it, soak it in, really learn it, and just, feel the song. It's not about how quickly you can get it out there. It's, do you really connect with that? And I think that's a lot of what this album has, is, in the rawness of it, is like, this guy believes this and connects with this material.
I would be phony if I tried to concoct something that I didn't have a stake in. I mean, I think that these songs, I would say every song that I've written that's made it to record, for the most part, has had, even the ones that were pure works of fiction, I would say that there's still an element of me inside of them that makes me able to sing them with conviction, and makes me sound like the guy that is talking about himself. I mean, there's that really inordinately long song that the Continental Drifters have called Daddy Just Wants It to Rain. And it's this whole story of like the kid and his father was a farmer, and they lost the farm, and the banker came and took it away. And, then he died, of course. What?
You're right.
Is supposed to wind up miserable song, but also epic length. And people would come up to me and say, I love that song about your daddy. That's not my dad. My dad was a banker. He might well have been the guy that foreclosed. Again, it's how you can craft this stuff to make it believable. I've got a song I've got a ghost story song that I wrote a couple of years ago that didn't make it to this record because it's different kind of instrumentation, but it's about a house I used to stay at in Virginia. And it's kind of a neat song, and I had to get outside of myself. But I think that I wrote it in such a way that even if you don't believe in ghosts, and even if you don't know the area, it'll give you enough like geographic signposts as to where you might find it, and what it is when you do, and why it is a ghost story. So I'm kind of excited about being able to do that. Like I say, once you start getting out of the realm of, oh, my girlfriend broke my heart.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I'm so mad. I'm so sad. I'm going to drink myself stupid. That's like, how many times can you say that?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like to retread. I like to look at what I've written and make sure that I'm not duplicating it. And sometimes I find that I have, and I don't mean to, but, look at somebody like Ray Davies. Ray Davies just got, I seem to recall somebody writing an article in a magazine once that Ray Davies has got like a twin song for almost every one of his hits that is incredibly close, if not exactly like the chords in the other song. And I can't remember exactly the ones that they're talking about, but that it's fine, who steal from the best. Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. I get that. But that also reminds me, the conversation with bassist Billy Sheehan, one of his side projects. He said, yeah, they had a rule. He said, we're not allowed to write any songs with the words hurt, love, or baby in them, because it's all been done as far as that. So.
I think Paul Rogers may have gotten the baby ban happening with I'll Be Creepin', which in the first verse he uses the word baby in every line. Great song. It's the first song a lot of people heard by Free, but
yeah,
but still, it's like, okay,
yeah.
what is this baby stuff? So, but I'm so happy to get to talk about this record, because it's a monument for me. It makes me feel like I was able to make something that's can be perceived as something new and interesting. And I could have made a strictly power pop record with a lot of 12 strings on it, a dozen harmonies, but I just didn't have that in mind this time around. I really wanted to get some of this kind of guitar based stuff out. And I got to do it with a great team of people and in 3.5 days. My God,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
I've done records that I've been worked on them for 6 months.
Wow.
That's too long.
Yeah.
It's like perspective goes right out the window, I think. I mean, for me, it would have. Fortunately, I was like the hired gun, and I didn't have to be there every day of 6 months. But I looked at the engineer, and I looked at the producer, and I looked at the main artist, and I was like, "You poor guys. You should get out more, go swimming, take a walk."
Right, right. Yeah. Holy, I would think you would just not even hear it anymore. Like,
I don't know how that record got completed, but it did, and they do because you have to, as with any record. I think the hardest thing maybe with Game Day is this record finished? Do I have all the tracks? Are these the right tracks? Again, who am I asking? I got nobody to ask.
Mm-hmm.
My
Yeah.
children, I mean, my therapist. I don't know. They don't. They charge extra for sequencing records.
Right.
So, if I can't do that, and I did all right with the sequence and stuff, but again, it's just like, how do you put a record together where you've done all the pieces yourself? You really need, you need somebody to help you with this. And so I got that this time, and I made a better record for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And finally it makes me wonder, like, I'm wondering about in the days when everyone had to record in a professional studio, because they didn't have one in their home, if because of the expense and they had to really keep it to what time they could afford, if that, at the time they hated it, but it ended up being an advantage because it forced them to get things out the door rather
Yeah.
than having your own home studio where you could noodle on things forever and ever.
Well, yeah. I mean, the budget constraints were active in this record. I didn't have, I mean, back in the day, I look at the advance we got for repercussion in 1982. It's like 200,000 pounds sterling, and that's a lot of money. That's
Yeah.
a lot of money. And then I look at and people love that record to this day. They love the sound of it. I look at Mavericks. That had a $30,000 budget in
Wow.
1993, maybe, I guess. 92, somewhere in there, 91, 92. I mean, Chris, to his credit, made that record sound as good as anything for that kind of budget. But still, you know, you don't get a $30,000 budget anymore unless you're, I'm sure there's somebody that gets it, but it isn't like garden variety 69-year-old rock musicians,
Or if you get it, you are never recouping that because it's
well, yeah, I mean, we never recouped the 200,000 British pounds, and
right.
so I understand, of course, that makes sense. Who's gonna I mean, unless you sell out the wazoo, unless it's like with publishing. It's like there are some real, like, top flight authors that the John le Carré and people like that just, make all kinds of money. They're on this strata. And
Yeah.
then everybody else is down there. And then eventually you find all those nice people whose books are on the remainders table. And,
Mm-hmm.
and the same thing with records. You see the high end box sets of all this stuff that's come out, and everybody doing every which way vinyl color known to man, and different, numbered sleeves and things. And
Yeah.
uh, you know, I mean, just put the record out. I like black vinyl as much as the next guy, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's fine. I mean, I just want to put the needle on the first groove, and I want it to jump out and grab me. That's what I want. And I think I've made a record that is going to do that for people. I'm excited about that. I mean, there's ways to creep into people's hearts, and there's ways to, like, explode into them, and I'm kind of looking for the latter this time around. I mean, this is the back 40 for me. I get it, fine. I've made a lifetime of making records and writing songs, and if it all ended tomorrow, I'd still have a release date. I mean,
Hmm.
so I mean, what a way to go out, right? I don't plan on going out, believe me, but if I had to, I would be completely satisfied with this being a great statement that I got to make. I'm so pleased. Don trusted my instincts with arrangements. The Label 51 Recordings, is as enthusiastic about my record as any record label has ever been about anything I've ever brought to them. That's exciting. I mean,
Hmm.
there's people there that are helping make this little car go. I love it. They'll push it up the hill if it has to, and then hopefully it'll go rolling down the other side and pick up some steam. And I got all excited when I got 1,000 listeners on Spotify. Who knew? And they're like, "Yeah, next time let's try for five times." Like,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I can do that. Let's see what kind of groundwork we can lay with this. So.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, I've already kept you a lot longer than I said I would, but is there anything we haven't covered about the album that you want to talk about?
Um, Not particularly. I mean, the cover art is by the great John Langford from the Mekons and the Waco Brothers, and I was so pleased that he was able to do that for me. And it's really stunning looking. It's going to be out on vinyl on Record Store Day,
Hmm.
so be sure and pester your local stores. Um, uh, what do I want to say about it? I'm just happy as I've ever been about a record with this, and I want to just say that I couldn't have done it without the support of my wife, who helped me think through all of this process and helped me make responsible decisions. And said, "Please don't make another record like the last one. Get a producer and a rhythm section and do it in a studio. We can make this work." So I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I agree. I totally agree." So I'm really grateful for her input on that. I'm grateful for my family's love and all the band members of all the bands that I've gotten to play with over the years and all the great people. I mean, think of all the people I've met because of music. I'm so lucky. I would have never met you probably unless we were
No.
standing next to each other, thumbing through the bins and saying, "Oh, I'm not going to listen to that one. I can't have
Right.
that one. What
Right.
about this one? I might listen to this one. Maybe I should
Right.
just.
Right.
It's only $50. I got it."
Yeah. No, I agree. It's and that's what you can count on. You can't count on being that upper 1% sales kind of thing. So, you
No, it's
know.
the community at the bottom 99%, and that works. That's we all put out records and try for the best. And we have limited degrees of success, but we make great records. I've got so many people in my generation of musicians that do that. Steve Wynn always comes to mind, Chris Kakovas, the guys in the Rain Parade who are on Label 51 Recordings also, Cindy Lee Berryhill, just brilliant people that just don't stop. They keep making
Mhm.
new good stuff.